Welcome to Inside the Circle, Creating Resilient Systems. I'm Kate Cooper, here with Autumn Cooper.
This has been a heavy week in the responder world, and before we say anything else, we want to acknowledge the lives lost and the people grieving.
We're not here to analyze those events or build anything off of them. We're here because they remind us of something important.
The weight of this work is real, and it's often carried silently. So today isn't about solutions.
It's about telling the truth about what this work asks of the people who do it.
So today we're going to be talking about the heaviness of this week in the responder world, and I want us to really have a conversation about why we're going to talk about it out loud.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Like there are a lot of like moral boundaries I have around tragedies in the responder world. And one of my big boundaries that I always go back to is that Inner Circle doesn't capitalize off of tragedies. And so it's a double-edged sword. We don't share things on like social media. When something bad happens, we're not the ones that are sharing the news stories, right? Like we're not the ones that are saying like, "Oh, I was there. I helped them. We did some kind of response. Like our agency was able to help in this situation." And I'm not faulting people who do that, but I'm just saying for us at Inner Circle, that's not a value that we hold. Um and because it is a double-edged sword, I do think that it kind of shines the light on us about like why don't you? It makes people think that we're not responding. When in reality, like we've known and we've been there and we're doing the things. You're just not going to know about it because you don't need to know about it.
Don't you think that maybe anchors back to the value of confidentiality? That even if
Yeah.
we're treating systems, we're not broadcasting it?
Yeah, and we leaned so far into confidentiality when we first opened. Um when we first opened, we polled a lot of our first responder friends and we said, "Why do you not go to therapy?" And the number one reason was confidentiality. And you can see that all the way back to like my husband's care. It was not confidential. It was leaked to supervisors. And we know this because when we started having suspicions about that, we would say some fake things to see if we heard about it. And we heard about it every single time. And so
Ouch.
in this responder space, confidentiality can sometimes be your job. Like it can sometimes cost you your job if the people that you are speaking to don't have the same value system. So we wanted to create a space that was almost secret. And on the other side of that, because we are we're so highly confidential, like we even have a code word if you're a client. If you call and say like, "Hey, what time is my appointment?" You have to provide like a lot of information before we give that to you because we don't ever want like someone's administration calling us and saying like, "Hey, does John Doe have an appointment tomorrow?" Because we're not going to affirm that you're seeing a clinician here. Like we're not ever going to do that. So we carry that value into all aspects of our work, including our social media work. And with this week being so heavy, do you want to kind of talk about why it was heavy, like without disclosing any information?
Yeah, I certainly think it's important to be clear because when this drops, right, it's probably going to be a few weeks out, and
Yeah.
it may feel like what happened this week when it's actually happened.
Yeah. So we had two local responders. They were killed on duty. And when first responders die, it's a big issue. Like it's a big thing. It very much ripples through the responder community. And in this case, it was kind of like in our backyard, like it was in our county. It was our friends. Like we knew these people, and we were called at 4 o'clock in the morning. And on our other podcast, on the Three Calls In podcast, the last time we recorded, one of the things that Shane said was, I know that I could call Colin in the middle of the night and he would answer. And I told him today when we were recording that podcast, I was like, I feel like you kind of cursed me because we got a call in the middle of the night. And what you don't see and what we don't publish and what we will not publish um, is everything that happens after we are alerted about some kind of critical incident. We take it very seriously. Um, the only people that we alert are the state level systems that need to know. And I sent out an email to our staff that said, this is highly confidential. You are not allowed, it will result in immediate termination if anybody leaks any of this information. And I mean that. And I feel like that's really harsh, but I do very much mean that we take confidentiality so seriously that if I know that any level of the staff breaks anything, even if it's not like a HIPAA violation, we can't have that. That's our reputation. Like we're protecting these people who protect everybody else. And we just have to take that so seriously.
So when we think about the why for having this conversation, it's
Mhm.
not to highlight that we're so great at confidentiality, but there was
Mm-mm.
something that was said between us when we were texting back and forth about it was you said this space demands truth.
Mhm. This space demands truth and it demands transparency, I think, because truth and transparency build trust. And I can't totally remember our entire conversation because it's been
The
it
week.
has been the week. It has just been it didn't stop. It hasn't stopped in an entire week. And I've talked to so many people about like the weight that is happening right now. Because when deaths happen in the responder community, people lean on to their friends and then they lean on to mental health providers. And eventually it kind of feels like a domino where maybe we're the last domino that's trying not to fall over. Um, and we're trying so hard not to fall over. But then everybody keeps like asking. They keep asking for more and they keep needing more and like we want them to. We want them to come to us for those hard things. But what happens if there's no support under that? And I think that brings us back to systems work, right?
Brings us back to systems work.
Yeah. What happens when you're the last domino? Who holds you up?
Well, I hope that in the system that we are working in, that we're holding each other up well. I
Mhm.
know that this week compared to other weeks, there have been way more text messages between leadership, way more communication on are we doing this well? Are
Mhm.
we supporting in the way that makes sense? You know, and I want to go back to the email where you thought it might be harsh. Again, if you just read that out of context, maybe, but because our culture is so steeped in this value of confidentiality, it's almost like, yeah, we know how serious this is, and you're
Mhm.
highlighting the seriousness of it, and we're not taking any chances with harming someone who sees something that we've shared or hurting a community member, even if they're not directly related to this, by anything that might be that we're capitalizing on
Mhm.
tragedy. It just goes against everything that we do.
Mhm. It made me so mad seeing the media footage, um, because it was so predatory, like,
Mm,
it was just there was no consideration for the people who loved those people, and there was no consideration for the other responders that were on scene,
right.
and one of the one of the big feelings that came up from such a hard week, I default to anger. I don't know if other people default to anger, but I just get really angry and then I have to like figure out where my anger is coming from. And for me this time around, my anger very much came from why was there not a protocol for aftercare? Why were people who should have known what to do not knowing what to do? Why was there not some kind of like flow chart? I go back to flow charts a lot. Why was there not like a flow chart for when something bad happens to the people who respond to things? There's no next steps. There's just mass chaos and then people like showing up and doing things, but there's no coordination of the things and we're just not totally sure like what is happening or what is going on or why we're even here or what we're doing. And I'm really proud of us in that moment because we aimed to be the professionals in the situation and we aimed to follow the critical incident stress management protocols. And we recognized that our SISM teacher, his name is Fuzzy Lake. He's out of North Carolina. And we really loved him. We took our first class with him online and then we flew him here to train our peer team. And one of the things that always rings in my head that he says is that you can't be the wild card in the room. So, when you're helping an agency after they have experienced a tragedy, if you're the wild card, if you have any personal feelings about what has happened, you need to remove yourself. Because when you're the wild card in the room, you are going to cause harm. And it's unintentional. I don't think anybody causes harm on purpose, right? But if you are the wild card, you have a chance at causing harm instead of helping. And I don't know that that wasn't done this week, but I do know from our team, we did not do that. We didn't step into a space where we didn't belong. And we recognized that we were the wild cards in the room because we were too close and too connected. And that was hard because, as one of my friends said this week, what do first responders do? They respond first. So, when a group of first responders or even first responder agencies hears about a tragedy that impacts them, where do they go? To the tragedy. That is their default, that is their training. You cannot fault somebody for what they have done their entire careers. Um, but taking a step back for us was really, really, really hard. And recognizing that this was not our space was really, really, really hard. And so I think just recognizing that and stepping into the space where you can say that and not feel like you let anyone down. Um that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of where I'm at this week. Like I feel like I've gone through all of the emotions. Um and where I always land is that we did the right thing regardless of benefit to us.
We practiced with integrity, right?
Yes.
We practice with integrity, which is a value that we hold.
Mhm.
And that can sometimes look like we're not showing up
Mhm.
because we're not involved in this race to be first on scene,
Mhm.
to respond first.
Which is so
It
hard.
just goes against what the heart wants. But
Yeah.
when we think about what people need to make relationships safe and sound, there's consistency, predictability, reliability, and routine.
Mhm.
And we work really hard to be that relational space after the storm, right?
Mhm.
And I think that happens in any time when someone dies, responder system or not. A lot of people descend
Mhm.
immediately upon the scene.
Mhm.
If that's Uncle Joe's house, right? Like, or, in the backyard of a community, they're going to be the first on scene. but being able to, like, put into practice our values and to hold true to these pillars of consistency, predictability, reliability, and routine.
Mhm.
We know that when everyone flees the scene or goes back to the day to day, even with the best SISM group operating those debriefs,
Mhm.
we've found that there's no true research that prevents post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mhm.
We found that they're incredibly helpful right there in the moment
Mhm.
to be seen and to be heard and to know you're not alone.
Mhm.
But I think our bigger responsibility is to be the person who shows up days and weeks later and says, we're here to hold
Yeah.
space for you in a way that makes sense. But again, that's really hard because I think all of us were like, okay, like it's 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's
What do
go.
we
We're
need to
ready.
do?
I'll be
Wherever you need
dressed in
us to
30
be.
minutes and,
Yeah.
and see you there. But we couldn't do that
Yeah.
because it went against the idea that you were just too close to it
Yeah.
to make objective sense of what was going on
Mhm.
in the moment.
Yeah. Something I told my kids this week was imagine you just had like the worst day. Like you were just fed up. Like maybe you were in a fight. Maybe something happened. You were just so tired of everything. And you finally get back to your house. Do you want to have a party there waiting for you? No.
No.
No, even if the party is handing you water and like telling you that they love you and that they want to take care of you want to sit on your couch and you don't want a bunch of people asking you how your mental health is because your mental health is not great.
Right, or you're in such deep shock that you're not in touch with how well you're doing,
Mhm.
and it may look like you're fine on the inside, but as soon as you get still and quiet, that's when it all comes up,
Yeah.
and for a lot of people, they need for that to come up when they feel safest, and that
Mhm.
oftentimes in our culture is when we're alone, when we're at home with the smallest, most intimate circle that we live in
Mhm.
or hold near to us, and
Mhm.
and sometimes it's just not the right thing to show up at at the party.
Yeah, sometimes it's we know that we are valuable um in the days and weeks after things settle because that's when it gets quiet. And I think that anybody who has ever experienced the death of a family member, like it's not so much like you have the shock and then you have the funeral and then everybody leaves and there's quiet and that quiet just kind of settles in and that's really when you start processing
Mhm.
what's happening. I'm sure there's some like therapy stuff that's happening, brain stuff that does some processing things, but
For sure, the shock wears off and the
mhm.
reality sets in.
Mhm. Hmm.
Well, and I think too, like when that reality sets in and you're sitting there alone with it, that's when you think, who can I reach out to?
Mhm.
And I think I think I shared this in this week while we were trying to figure out our best next steps. Like the people who immediately kind of descend get really woven into the experience of that moment
Mhm.
and unintentionally and non malevolently
Mhm.
become part of that hard time.
Yeah.
Because I saw you there at my weakest. Maybe
Mhm.
there's some shame that kicks in because they saw big emotions being confronted, or shame often kicks in because there's a lack of emotional expression because I'm close to this
Mhm.
person and I should be crying and I should be raging. I should feel anger or fear or frustration or a myriad of other emotions, but they're flat and just moving through the second by second motions because guess what? They're first responders and they are trained well to do that,
Mhm.
to distract themselves emotionally from the moment. And so, hopefully people understand and recognize that. And again, I don't want us to come across as like shaming the people who showed up. They did
No,
what
they
they
yeah.
thought they needed to do in that moment
Yeah.
as much as we did what we thought we needed to do in that moment
Mhm.
with no malevolence.
No.
Only the idea of support and love and care
Mhm.
for this group of people that often gets overlooked.
Yeah. And I think that it is so important to recognize that when something big impacts the community, there are people hurting that you don't even think about. Like it's a shockwave and it goes far and far and far and far and you can't even guess who all is involved. So I think that the real important thing is compassion because people love first responders. Like, first responders are very supported groups. Not all branches, not all of the time, but in general, I think that you can say that people generally consider them to be heroes, and people generally are very heartbroken when bad things happen.
especially at the community level.
Well, I think that this ties back into why do we do hard jobs? Like, why do like we're doing hard jobs by holding emotional weight of people who also are doing hard jobs. So why do you think that people choose professions where they know the job will be hard?
We were listening to the group of people who do um, the podcast that we also have 3 calls in right before this, and I think that they answered that question so beautifully when one of them called it the calling.
Mhm.
And I think that you are called to do this because, again, they brought up that you're not making a whole bunch of money. You're
Mhm.
not working a predictable day to 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 job, but your heart is driven to do this mission aligned work.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the reasons people are called to do that is because they have a mission, right? Like I'm in this work because my mission as an individual on this planet is to leave the world better than I found it.
Mhm.
And I want that to happen in every interaction that I'm in. So I absolutely consider this a calling.
Mhm.
Um, why do you think people get into this work, this hard, heavy, gritty?
I mean, I think it's a calling. There's been several classes that I've taught where I have just kind of spouted out um our position is that you have been called to do this work. And my position is that I am called to ensure that you can do this work for as long as you want to do it. Because I've seen the impacts of stepping out of this work. Like, my husband loved being a cop. It was his favorite thing. If you asked him right now, if he misses being a cop, he would say absolutely. He loved the rush. He loved getting to do all of the cool things. Like, he loved saving people. Like, it very,
Taking bad guys off the
oh, he
street.
loves that. He
We
loves,
talked about that this morning.
oh, yeah, it's his favorite thing. Um, but what had changed for him was that the bad things piled up and they got to be more of the bad things than the good things. And that's a big reason why Inner Circle started, was because if he had had the support that we now provide others, then he could probably still be doing what he loves. And, like, yes, he could go get a job as a police officer again, and he would have a great time. He really, really would. But now he has this mission to enable others to be able to do something that he stopped doing. But you could see it. You could see, like, the twinge in his eyes when other people are talking about, like, the fun calls they went on, or, like, this crazy police chase, and you can tell, like, he wants to get up and he wants to go. And I don't think that that's something that'll ever, like, be driven out of him, and I think that you could even see that in, like, retired police officers. Like, that jumping into that scene or jumping into the chaos and making some kind of sense of it is so, like, ingrained in them because it's their calling. So that's why I do it, cuz I've seen when your calling is interrupted, and I want people to do their jobs for as long as they could possibly do their jobs.
And to do them well.
Yes. And to be healthy while they're doing them, and to not have their families fall apart while they're doing them. Like, I don't want them to have to sacrifice their entire lives for a job.
You touched on something really important there with Colin, and that this cumulative exposure,
Mhm.
this day to day to day thing that they're constantly seeing hard experiences, like tragic accidents
Mhm.
unfolding in front of them, scenes that no one should witness. I think there's also a lot of weight that comes from being the hero and the
Mhm.
helper and the person doing all the work of holding hard things together in the community, right?
Mhm.
Because police officers are hearing the worst things in the worst moments of someone's life sometimes, and that
Mhm.
cumulative exposure just piles up in your bones.
Mm.
And if you don't have a place for that to land, or at least to be spread out, then it stays inside of you.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's a rule, but I will say that a lot of the knowings I have from working and being in a first responder world, and being married to a first responder for 20 years, was like, they're super great internalizers.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I don't know if that's a rule, like, if that's asked on the interview questions, but, like, are you good at keeping it in?
Mhm.
Because and maybe even if you're not, you're conditioned to do so,
Mhm.
right? Because if you're the weak link in this chain, then you're letting your crew down, you're letting the department down, you're letting your leadership down.
Mhm.
And that's something, I think when we talk about calling, I think that that's the calling we have, is to bust through some of those ideas and
Yeah.
those myths
Yep.
and those old ways of doing business.
Mhm.
Because as we heard the guys say in the last podcast when they were just recording, like, that's we have to be updated in how we approach this.
Mhm.
They talked about the people who, stick around for 20 years, and how, they're seen as those heroes, and look at them, they've got this grit, they've got this determination,
Mhm.
compared to the people who only last a few years,
Mhm.
and that's because of a personal failure.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the thing. When we talk about the calling, it's to push back against this idea that it's a personal failure, that it's a
Yeah.
systems issue that
Yeah.
can be addressed by some pretty simple things, and one of them was listen to your people.
Yeah.
And, wow, the weight of this is all just kind of sitting on us this week.
Mhm.
Like, why do you think people are called to do this values-driven work, this mission-driven work, outside of it being their calling? Like, what drives that being their calling? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I This might end up totally being a rabbit trail, and you're gonna have to, like, reel me back
Oh, I
in.
love rabbit trails, so I'm not the right person for that, but
So I've now heard this twice, and the first time I balked at it because I didn't really love who it was coming from. But the second time was the same message, and it was from somebody that I very deeply care about that I was talking to this week. And he said to me, um, "Look, people have hard jobs. Like, you can see neonatal nurses. I actually don't know if that's the right term. The people who work with very small babies who have a very low chance at surviving. Um, that career field is not experiencing the high suicide rate that first responders, as in cops, firefighters, and EMS, are seeing. Why? What's the difference? Because they're both seeing horrific things. They are both experiencing tragedy on a day to day basis. Why is it that the police, fire, and EMS side is experiencing such a high suicide rate when maybe the nursing side, while it does happen, is not as high? And he said, and so did the other person, that a lot of times it goes back to childhood adversity and people being drawn to like a hero role where maybe they're helping in a situation where they were not helped, or also like that is just the way that your brain is wired due to, I don't know, ace scores or whatever. But that is what makes them drawn to these professions.
I keep smiling at you because this is the exact conversation I had with your husband on the way up here today. I and and maybe hearing it the third time will help it land a little bit.
Well, I'll like it from you.
As
It was
Thank
the
you.
first
You
first
know,
time.
uh, I go back to Freud. This is the second episode that I'm talking about Freud, but Freud had this idea of this defense mechanism called sublimation.
Mhm.
And we talked about, Oklahoma specifically, where we tend to rank highest in the number of people with more ACE scores than other states. At the last time that they released those rankings, we were, in the top 3, which is really the bottom 50,
Mhm.
and of children who've experienced significant adversity. And I think there is some definite truth to becoming who you needed
Yeah.
right? You needed somebody to help you or to help you navigate healing or to be a hero for you or to hold hard things with you.
Mhm.
And you didn't have that. So you became that because you know how deeply critical that is to your well being on a subconscious level.
Mhm.
So Freud would say you took all of those negative things and sublimated it into this role that you now play.
Hmm.
The challenge is, I think the same is true for therapists.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of therapists come into the field with a higher levels of adversity than the general population. I remember seeing in the screening of the film Resilience, Rob Anda talked about the numbers at the APA, the American Psychological Association's annual conference where he did everybody's ACE scores in the room. They were
Mhm.
significantly higher than the people in the original ACEs study,
Yeah.
which was still really, really high,
Yeah.
way higher than we thought. At least 1 in 3 people experiencing at least one type of those adversities. And you can look up the ACE score if you're curious about it. It really only applies at the population level, but when we're talking about outcomes, but at the individual level, that is your story. And when you've experienced significant adversity, you succumb to it and become and are on the other side of law enforcement and
Mm.
first responder
Mhm.
systems, right? In prison populations, jail populations, populations of with high levels of being unhoused. All of at the root of that is adversity. Are those adverse childhood experiences? I have absolutely zero doubt about it. But on the flip side of that are the people who sublimated that into their calling,
Mhm.
that created space for them to be who they needed, and like me, leave the world better than they found it, right?
Mhm.
They're they probably, I imagine, at least one time in their first 18 years, in addition to all of the adversity and trauma, had one person who saw the beauty in them or saw the
Mhm.
good in them,
Mhm.
and that stuck like Velcro in their brain of like, "Oh, I could be good too." And then they come into that. So do I believe the 2 people? Yes.
Mhm.
I would even say the research pans out to be really true in that.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at and, nurses, I think that there's a little bit of something there too, like, nurses have a lot of adversity in their history too, but I think that there's a lot more, like, especially if we're thinking about NICU nurses, people in
Mhm.
the neonatal ICU.
I said it right,
You
huh?
did, you're so good.
I was guessing.
You're so brilliant, and you pulled it out of from some deep well of knowledge that you have
Yes.
inside your brain. But NICU nurses, I think, you know, their day-to-day is pretty much the same, right?
Mhm.
They're helping babies get better or those babies don't get better.
Mhm.
And that's a very when we go back to those 4 pillars of relationship, right? Like, there's predictability, there's consistency, there's routine,
Ooh.
there's reliability in their days. They
Oof.
know what they're walking into.
That's hard.
But if you think about first responders, every day is a different day.
Mhm.
And every interaction is a different interaction, right?
Mhm.
They're not consistently met as like this good guy in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
They're not predictably recognized as a hero.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're the person who's accompanying a DHS worker for removing your child from removing a child from their home,
Mhm.
and they are the bad guy.
Yeah.
There's an absence of predictability. There's an absence of consistency, especially as it pertains to the values that communities hold in them.
Mhm. And that creates chaos, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm guessing. That creates chaos, and if somebody who grew up in chaos,
That's familiar.
it's a natural step. It's the chaos to chaos, but this chaos, you're at least trying to be helpful, like, you're serving,
Right.
you're trying to help. You were talking about your mission in life, and I love that, and I was sitting over here like, "What is my mission in life?" And and I think for a really long time, I have very much seen the people who help others, like, all capacities, not just first responders. Like, you can go, like, pastors, you can go, like, the person who volunteers, the people who give everything of themselves to benefit other people. That has very much been my calling in life, is recognizing that those people exist and providing support to them. The last domino. I provide support to the last domino. That's my calling.
I love that. And I love that you came to it so easily. I've really spent some time trying to figure out what mine is. Um, and, people I even said it to somebody once, and they're like, "Well, how will you know?"
Mhm.
And I don't know that I will know, right? Like, I certainly, can't imagine I'll be observing the celebration that is called for when my life is now over. But I hope that I get to see it in the people that feel seen or heard, at least for the first time in their lives after an
Mhm.
interaction with me. So, how do I know if I left it better? Like, all I can hope is that those interactions feel safe and beautiful for everybody that I've interacted with.
Mhm.
And I just want to hold this huge umbrella over everybody to feel safe and heard and seen. Um, and that's probably because I've worked my entire adult life to become who I needed. And I
Yeah.
had some really great examples of that.
Yeah.
I had some really important examples of people who saw me in this quick moment. And, we'll bring it back to resilience. I mean, it doesn't have to be this lifelong relationship you have with somebody. It can be a
Mhm.
very meaningful interaction that you have with someone that changes their life forever.
Yeah. Look, you're the only reason my kid can talk. And, like, that was before we even knew each other, and it goes back to our origin story, which I feel like just really fast. When we first moved to Oklahoma, my son needed a speech therapist very, very badly, and, for some reason, I just Googled, like, "How do I get a speech referral?" And I ended up at Autumn's health department with Autumn, getting a speech referral from Autumn for this amazing lady named Julie in Pulse Valley, and she is the only reason that my son can now talk clearly. And it took years, but you did that. That was you. And if I had never ever met you again, I would still remember you for that. So I can't be the only person with that experience.
I hope not. I hope not.
No.
Thank you. Thank you for
Just
sharing
making
that.
you cry on our podcast today.
It's been a heavy week.
It has been.
And I think we already kind of said that we're gonna end up crying today on Friday.
Hmm. We were kind of
Some
hoping for crying at the bar later,
yeah,
though.
for later. Yes. Um, yeah, mission-driven work,
Yeah.
right? This is why we get into it, to be who we needed and to show up for people that other people might run away from,
Hmm.
right? Or situations that other people might try to pretend don't even exist.
Yeah. And like, we all have an option, right? Like, we all have an option to do the easier job.
Oh, yeah. I would very much love to be a barista. I think it would be
You'd be the barista therapist.
yes, well, it's like 7 minute brief intervention,
Mhm.
and then people leave with coffee. Like, that would be
Feels
amazing.
like a business model. We should develop that.
We certainly could. I think we'd be great. I mean, I see a yoga/wine/coffee bar in my future, running that
Yes.
and, and healing retreats in Belize, but we can get to that business plan later. Yeah.
I think that the real key idea is that people don't choose these jobs because they are easy. They choose them because they are called to do them.
Right. And they're confronted with seeing people on their worst days,
Mhm.
and I don't know that any amount of internal resolve can keep you in the field for forever.
Mhm.
I think that that's a systems issue. I
Mhm.
think, we heard, the group on 3 calls in talk about the value of training and education, the value of leadership development.
Mhm.
And so, if we want people to stay in the field longer, we can't make it a personal responsibility or a personal failure if they don't. We have to look at ourselves.
Mhm. So last night I was listening to our previous podcast. It was the first time that I had had time to sit down and actually listen to the whole thing instead of just watching the clips. And I ended up having, and this like will bridge us into talking about leadership and organizational responsibility. And I actually think I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the text, and my dad can be mad at me later. Um, so my dad and I were kind of talking about the topics that we discussed last time, and the challenges of leadership. And to give you just a little bit of backstory, like my dad was a high level executive for many years. Um, and also is of the generation, like, where you stay in that job for a very your entire career, like, you don't job hop, you don't do all this other stuff, you just, like, you manage the people, you figure out what to do, and so he was telling me some stuff, and he goes, let me find it, I'm finding it. He went back to my quote about how I was talking about, you need to train your people even if they're going to leave. And because otherwise, why would you want to keep them? Why would you want them to stay? Why would you risk them staying if you're not willing to invest in making them better and helping them to be better? And he said, a person grows from adversity. And I felt like I was channeling you in, in my response, because I said, not if they're not supported in adversity. And he said, self supporting needs to come, and I said, you have to have the skills to self support. Self support is a myth. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's physically impossible, which is that's a you thing. That was your first training that I ever went to. You could do things that seem like self support, like researching how to handle things, but that's not self support. That's research guided support. You're just finding the research on your own, and someone else supported you in finding that. So you could call it self initialization, but not self support. And then he was just like, I don't need fancy words. I just need results. And I was like, I feel like I just won. I just won that one. That's a me. I won, Dad.
One. Yeah, Julie Williamson is the one who kind of brought to light that idea of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps isn't even possible.
Mm-hmm.
But if, you get a couple of people beside you and a couple of people behind you and a couple of people in front of you, they're going to raise you up so high.
Mm-hmm.
And I would challenge anybody to believe that they got to where they are and in the presence of a really hard growing up, that they did that by themselves, then they are probably overlooking the dozens of people and the dozens of situations where they were seen, where they were heard, and where they were felt. And if you're doing that, you're taking what is it? Like you're taking credit.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking credit for the work of another person and saying
Yeah.
that was all you.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Like our country, Western culture is like the foundational thing is rugged individualism.
Yeah.
We love a good story of rugged individualism.
Yeah.
We love to see somebody rise from the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And but you don't do that alone.
Yeah.
And if you did do that alone, please contact us because we'd like to talk to you and get some input from like how you truly did that
Yeah.
in a bubble, because
Yeah.
I just don't see that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And also kudos for having important conversations with your dad and dispelling some of those myths. Like if we continue to live with these beliefs, and didn't they say in the last recording, like to challenge the status quo?
Yeah.
I do believe in this idea of burning kind fires,
Mm-hmm.
of saying, we've lived under this belief for far too long. It's
Yeah.
killing people.
Yeah.
It's killing people.
Yeah.
Because if they're the weak link in that chain, in that department, in that crew, they're holding it in, they're internalizing it. We've already touched on this as a group that, anecdotally, I would say, is a healthy group of internalizers.
Mm-hmm.
And then they continue to internalize until they explode or implode, which is responder suicide.
Yep.
And we can't be using and leaning on those outdated, stories. We have to disrupt them. And I hope that that's what we do. I hope that that's, that I'm using my mission wisely in doing that exact same thing of disrupting the idea of personal responsibility. And can I also talk about regulation, right? Like this is a challenge in Western culture too that I've noticed. The idea of self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
This notion that you can regulate your mind and your body
Cry it out.
by yourself. Yeah, that you just calm down, right?
Yep.
There's a famous meme, maybe not famous to everybody, but famous in my life, that says never in the history of calm down has anybody calmed down by being told to calm down.
Yeah.
Right? When I ask that question out loud in front of training groups, I ask what happens next, and they say, "Oh, I might shut down, but I don't calm down."
Yeah.
And then that shutdown goes back to what we talked about last week, which is quiet quitting. That freeze response of I'm showing up to work to be a warm body. That fight response, shows up. I keep going to work every day, keep going to work every day, keep going to work every day. But inside, I'm screaming. Inside, I feel alone. Inside, I feel unimportant and devalued
Mhm.
by the system, you know. But self-regulation's kind of a myth,
Yeah.
right? You know, the trajectory of that, I often talk about it being a developmental process because that's how I see it. So, you know, the first year of life, you're getting regulated by your grown up. You
Mhm.
get regulated. You cry, your
You
grown up.
should be.
Right. You cry, your grown up comes.
Mhm.
You need food, your grown up feeds you.
Mhm.
And given so I'm tying it back to the ACE scores, you're right. Like a lot of our people experience neglect at the population level. That's true of Oklahoma.
Mhm.
And so then you have authority neglect in your history.
Mhm.
Then you go to work. And I think it was talked about again in the last podcast, the sense of abandonment that you're
Mhm.
out there all alone doing this big, big work all alone, told to go have a beer, told
Mhm.
to go maybe
Shake it off.
shake it off, right? Like it's a Taylor Swift song. And that's impossible.
Yeah.
And so when we go back to the idea of co-regulation, right? Like first we have being regulated. The mama regulates the baby. Best case scenario, mama
Mhm.
regulates the baby consistently for the first year of life. And then what's supposed to happen for the next 7 years of life until you're about 8 years old, your grown-up's supposed to co-regulate with you.
Mhm.
So you develop the capacity for self-regulation. But even that is not the goal to
Mhm.
be able to regulate self, because what happened this week when we were all very dysregulated? What's the one thing you think we all did pretty consistently? We
We
were
uh, we talk to each other.
we talked to each
We
other.
did.
We co-regulated.
Yeah.
We reached out. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know, like so many of our conversations, I'm like, I'm losing it.
Mhm.
I'm losing it, Kate.
Yeah.
So many of the conversations, you know, that we've had this week is wow, like are like
I'm spiraling right now.
right. I'm shutting down. I don't know if I can make it.
Mhm.
But that takes what why in our work culture is that something we can easily do?
Well, we've built that culture. We built this trust and communication, and I think in our culture we fully expect, well, first of all, we check in on each other too. We check in on our staff and each other quite frequently. We very much normalize saying like I am not okay. Like
Mhm.
I'm not doing well. Um And historically, that's actually been one of the hardest things that I've ever done, and I think that that's true for many people. But there was even times this week where when I didn't know what to feel, I would call a friend, and that friend would be like, "Are are you okay?" And I was like, "No. No, I'm not okay." I don't know what's wrong. Like, I don't know why I can't stop crying. Like, I don't know what is happening in my brain right now, but I know that, like, I am not okay. And I definitely had a breaking point with, I feel like I hold people's emotions too much, and I think that that's why I don't wanna ever be licensed as an actual therapist. Um, I hang on to them, and I don't ever let them go.
I promise you that gets better with
I
good
You've
supervision.
said that. I know you've said that. I just don't think, like, I don't think I understand feelings enough to be able to, like, also hold other people's feelings without being totally overwhelmed, and so,
Well, you are a person in a Western culture.
ugh, it's hard, man. Um, but there was a breaking point I had this week where, like, I was just in my office crying at one of my employees willingly, she was also crying. Um But, like, I was telling her, I was like, "I don't even know why I'm crying right now. Like, I don't know why I'm sad. I don't know why I'm not sad. I don't know if I'm feeling other people's pain right now. Like, I don't even know if I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm just crying." And after that tipping point where I reached out, like, I had probably reached out to 2 or 3 people before that point, just saying like, "Hey, I'm not really okay." But in that moment, I think probably because it was in person too and not, like, over the phone. In that moment, I was able to get to a point where I was like, "Hmm, okay." Like, I kinda like, I'm seeing this regulation, I'm seeing this co-regulation that is happening, and, like, The person that I was with, she's adorable, and we were both sitting there like, "Don't look at me cry, I am an ugly crier," and so, like, at one point, we were both, like, just sitting like this, and, like, whenever we were talking, like, we were just not looking at each other because we were like, "I'm crying," and we didn't want each other to see each other crying, but it was healing for me. I think it was hopefully really healing for her. I should probably talk to her about it, but, um it was in that moment where that co-regulation was happening, where all of this pent up feelings, all of these pent up feelings were finally able to get out. And from that point on, like, yes, I have been overwhelmed since then. Yes, I am much quicker to anger and much quicker to snip and quicker to lose my patience. Um, but I'm okay now. And I think that like, there's a lot of value in that, and there's a lot of value in having a system that supports you being able to do that.
I call that the audacity to be human.
Mm,
I think that that's what that is, where you feel free enough to feel enough,
mhm,
and I said this morning to, your husband too, like, it comes out so it can get out. It
mhm,
comes up so it can get out. Things that we've buried or emotions that we've suppressed or repressed or denied or
mhm,
subdued or avoided, all
mhm,
of those things that Western culture teaches us, when in fact, if we name the emotion, Dan Siegel teaches us we can tame the emotion.
mhm,
And so this idea of like what happens on a neurobiological level when you're with someone and you're like, I'm just feeling lost. Your brain was like, oh, we need to give you a little bit of this like endogenous enzyme called GABA that helps you feel a little bit more soothed. And then when you're feeling your big emotions in with someone else, like
mhm.
cry, even if you're crying and can't look at each other, which is, like I love that. Um, I often encourage people uh, to turn away from each other when they're having hard conversations, so the
Mhm.
amygdala doesn't have to try to pick up on pupil dilation and nostril flares and jaw
Ooh.
clenches, because it can get derailed by that and shut down the conversation. But if we let that release happen of that GABA,
Mhm.
that comes from the cortical rim, in about 90 seconds, we can process the emotion.
Wow.
In 90 seconds. Or we can spend decades running away from them.
Yep.
And if more people knew about that little biohack,
Mhm.
like, I think that they would gravitate towards using it,
Yeah.
and it's a matter of shifting from "I'm angry" or "I'm overwhelmed" to "I feel angry, I feel overwhelmed,"
Mhm.
and having someone say, "Yeah, I see that, you feel that." And you don't just get the GABA, you get dopamine and oxytocin
Mhm.
and some of the serotonin that comes from being regulated by a person that you trust.
Mhm.
And we do that really well as friends, right?
Yeah.
Like if I call you to be like, "Oh my gosh, guess what just happened?" You're like, "What?" Like, "I'm gonna go after this person with you." We would never do that, go after anybody. We know the rules and the laws. But you would at least give me a space to feel seen and heard in that way.
Mhm.
Like whose tires do we need to go slash, right? Not
I'm
that.
glad you say that though, because like that's an area that as a leader, like, and a friend, I also like I struggle in that because I'm like, does she feel validated and seen? Like, am I being too aggressive and how much I would like to murder this person for her? Um,
Never.
okay, good, good. I am aggressively on your side, and I hope that my leadership style reflects that across very many people, like a lot of people. I am aggressively on your side.
I mean, who doesn't want a ride or die
Yeah,
friend, right? Who
like.
doesn't want that person in their corner?
Mhm.
Yeah, you can get mad at all the people. I love that you're so good at feeling angry.
Mhm.
Um, not a lot of women can be in touch with that side of
Mhm.
themselves. Like it's a sign of some big work you've done. Even in our conversations this week, I'm like, am I sounding like I'm mean? Am I sounding like an asshole?
You
And you're
never
like,
get angry. I feel like you struggle getting angry, right?
well, you could ask my children and they would say, no, she's fine there. I think I do get really frustrated, but I also think that because of the reflective practice work I've done for 15 years,
Mhm.
that I'm really able to reflect on that. And, I've been in spaces where I'm just noticing the rage is at a 10 inside of my body.
Mm.
And not everybody has the capacity to be like, I notice that the rage is at a 10 inside of my body. Because most people, when it's at a 10, are flipping tables,
Yeah.
right? So absolutely get angry. I think a lot of times too, like what we've been taught and what we teach in the field of, therapy is that anger is often a secondary
Ugh, I
emotion.
hate it when my therapist says that.
I know, but it covers up usually fear.
Mhm.
And so that's, one of the curiosities I hope that you've heard me say, like, what are
Mhm.
you afraid of? Like
Mhm.
what's driving this fear? Because anger, gets to be expressed when we're the most afraid or when we're the most sad,
Yeah.
because it's more acceptable in Western culture to punch a wall than it is to drop it, like let tears fall out of your
Yeah.
eyes. So I kind of want to shift into this space of leadership and organizational capacity. And I know that in so many ways that that's my wheelhouse, right?
Mhm.
But when you're talking about your leadership style, even questioning it here in our own conversation. But what do people not see about taking responsibility for so many people when you're the leader?
Sometimes, oftentimes, I would say that people do not take into consideration the weight that the leaders hold, especially like I think we talked last time about middle management and how you're getting pressure from below and pressure from above, and you're just trying your best to like swim. But when you're at the very top, everything is your fault and everything comes down to you. And that can, to me, I feel pressure because I'm providing for everybody's livelihood, right? Like to me, our staff is not like employees to me. I'm not like I actually have no idea how many employees that we have. Every time someone asks me like how many employees do you have, I have to like count and I like count through the offices and the very business minded people will be like you should know this off the top of your head. You should know all of your numbers and all of these other things and I'm like I don't. Like, I know Autumn and I know Kylie and I know Jennifer and I know like I go through and I name them all. And that's how I track them because to me, they are all humans and they are not numbers. And that maybe that's not the right way to lead a company, but it's how I lead a company. And I'm just kind of hoping that my compassion and my seeing the humanity in people will eventually like win out. Um,
I will say it's what drew me to wanting to partner with you.
oh, good.
I wanted to feel, like this overwhelm I wanted to be valued,
Yeah.
and I knew from the first moment that we met, not including the very first origin story moment that we met, but when we met again,
Mhm.
that you were somebody that I wanted to do the big work with,
Yeah.
right? Like, I've had that feeling, about a handful of people in my life
Mhm.
that I'm just like, I want to work alongside her in
Mhm.
doing this big, big work. So I will absolutely say that if I did not get the sense that you were a compassionate leader, I would have
Mhm.
never approached you.
Oh.
Because I turned my life upside down to work
Mhm.
alongside you.
Yes, you
I
have.
I've flipped
You have
trajectories.
sacrificed.
Yes. And
Yes.
I have gained
Yeah.
so much.
Oh.
I love coming to work. I love waking up and seeing emails that I know I'm gonna be able to respond to well and get something done.
Mhm.
I love the sense of camaraderie that you bring to the table,
Mhm.
that we are, in essence, a family.
Mhm.
And I know some people push back against the idea that work and family are the same, but again, you spend a third of your waking hours
Mhm.
working.
Yeah.
You spend a third of your a third of your life in bed, right? And then the rest of your life in community.
Mhm.
And I want to work in a space where I also feel that's my community,
Yeah.
right? And you created the pathway for that.
Oh, I love that. I'm really proud. We had a leadership meeting yesterday. My
Mhm.
all of my days are blurred. Um, we had our first like leadership retreat in January, and then we meant to do like a monthly leadership meeting. I don't know what happened to February's. It just didn't happen. I probably skipped it, and everybody else went, and I don't. I don't know what happened, but
I
w
don't I think we were waiting for you to schedule
I
it
think
as
so
the
too,
leader,
and then I
which would
forgot.
maybe not have been
Uh,
the wisest move on our behalves because 'cause we're all leaders and we could all
yeah.
schedule.
Well, we had our first one though,
Yes.
and one of the things that really stuck out to me is Catherine, our clinical director, who we do need to have on this podcast. I think that that would be a really fun one. Um, she takes care of all of our clinicians, and so the clinicians are a major part of our company. They are the faces that our clients see. They're the people that our clients trust. They are honestly the most important part of our company, and without them we wouldn't exist. So I always want to make sure that they're feeling valued, but sometimes like you don't know. And also I think that there's like this intimidation factor. A lot of times like people are worried to be around me, and like I don't want to scare them, and then if I'm in the office, like I worry that I'm scaring them by being in the office. When I'm not in the office, I'm worried that I'm scaring them by not being in the office. And so I just like I try to keep a pulse on it through Catherine. And one of the things that she said was that they love working at Inner Circle, and that they when she does their quarterly reviews, like, they come into her office and they're like, "I get to stay, right?" And, like, I love that so much because I don't I don't wanna have a place where all of my employees are like, "Yeah, I'm looking for the next job," or like, "Mm, this is fine, but I know that there's better," or like, "This is just a job for me." Like, I don't think it's just a job for any of our employees. I think it's a calling. I think it's a mission, and I think that they're all on board, and none of I'm gonna have to like knock on wood for this, but none of our employees have ever left because they wanted to. And I am super proud about that. So I hope that that's what compassionate leadership does. And maybe that ends up being a model for the things that we teach because it's relational. And we teach a lot about relational leadership. And
Relational leadership, transformational leadership,
hmm
and what it means to be a trauma-informed leader.
hmm
To understand that people are coming into you with histories behind them and fears in front of them every
hmm
time you say their name, and recognizing the weight that you carry
hmm
as a leader. Um, Not everybody does that. Not every leader operates with the level of awareness that you operate with.
hmm
Not every leader understands that my absence might be telling a story, my presence might be telling a story.
hmm
You know, and in the same token, leaders are just doing their job. Like, I've
Yeah.
worked in places where the leader would come in, and randomly throughout the month, and we would be just like, "Oh, like,
Oh,
who's getting
oh,
fired?
why are they here?
Why are they here? Who's getting fired?"
Yeah.
Rarely was it, "Who's getting raises? Oh,
Mm,
who's getting a
who's
promotion?"
in
It's, "Who's
trouble?
in trouble? What happened now?
hmm
Why are they here?"
Yeah.
Even if they come every month.
Yeah.
Even if they come every month. So even being able to vocalize, like, my presence means that I'm carving out time to be here because I
Yeah.
love being with you. My absence means I'm working
Yeah.
on other big things to make sure that this work remains sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's, like, that just shows the gift of presence,
Yeah.
right? And the challenge of presence. What do you wish leaders knew better about creating a space of wellness and wholeness at work?
That's hard. That's a hard one. I wish that I wish that they listened more. I wish that they created an environment where listening to what their employees said was not based in fear of retaliation. Like I think that so many spaces could be improved if the leaders of those spaces were willing to hear hard feedback about their performance the same way that I think that all performance reviews should be 360 degrees. I think that your employees should rate you at the same time that you are rating them. I don't think we haven't done a performance review for you because I feel very same level with you. But like with everybody else, I do even with Colin, I do a 360 review where I rate you and you rate me, And I have this whole list of questions about like, how is my performance? Of course, I make them. So there's some like bias there. There's some ways to make sure that my feelings aren't totally hurt. But I think for leaders who give their whole self to their jobs, and we see this all the time in public health. Like people really, really love their jobs. And they put their whole heart and soul into it. And any kind of negative feedback from their staff can be like crushing and it can really, really hurt your ego. And creating a space where your employees can say, like, it scares me when you pop up randomly. Like I get really nervous that I'm going to be in trouble when you show up. Um, then I know that first off, I scare you, and that makes me a little bit sad. Second off, that I should probably work on building my relationship with you. Third, I should probably let you know when I'm going to be popping into the office. I'm not very good at that one. I'm good at it for a couple weeks and then I forget. Um,
Well, I think we're both good at being consistently in the office on
on
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays, sometimes.
Even if for 30 minutes.
Yeah, we try. We try really hard. And I do I think another really important element and something that has honestly very much changed the culture for us was people were feeling disconnected because therapists are in session most of the day. And then there's all this other work that's not therapy. And then there's like the billing side and the scheduling side and the customer service side. Like there's so much that goes into any workplace that getting everybody on the same page is really difficult. And so I started this Monday morning debrief where sometimes I'm not great about it, but I try every Thursday to record a video so that you're seeing my face. You're not just expected to read an email. So even when I'm not in the office for an extended period of time, you still see my face and you at least know who I am and what I stand for and what I do. And I talk about the topic of the week. Right now, we're going through the A Circle framework, and I am talking about some grants that we were applying for. Um, this started last July and has gotten significant positive feedback since that point because people were feeling a little bit lost. And now whenever I am feeling like there's like weird tension at the office or like maybe I'm freaking people out a little bit, I make sure that my debrief goes out that week. I make sure that they see my face and I make sure that they know that I'm human. Like a lot of times I don't even wear makeup for it. Like they're truly some of my worst videos. Like my cat will go across my computer or like the one yesterday, my dog was drinking in the background and I was like, I don't know why everybody's making noise as soon as I start recording, but this is what my life is like, to just kind of humanize me a little bit because I think a lot of times people will put their bosses on this pedestal of like perfection. And I don't ever want anyone to think that I'm perfect because I am far from, and you do not need to put me on a pedestal. I am always relatable and I will make sure that you know that I am relatable at all times.
I love that. I think too, we just instituted monthly reflective supervisions
Mm,
times together, and I get to be kind of a face with our clinical team every other week now, leading both of those, leading the meeting every other week. Catherine, trusting me with that was a pretty big deal. But getting the ability to do that, and that was the feedback we got too. It's going to feel like we're really building relationships with each other,
mhm,
and I'm looking forward to this space,
mhm,
when we were talking about what it was and how it looked. And then this week we did our very first one, and the same feedback came down like, oh, I get to be a normal human, not
mhm.
just a super therapist, because I think people, much like bosses, look up at therapists with the same kind of like, you must
Yeah.
always be regulated
Mhm.
or you're never angry, which is, something you just shared with me,
Yeah.
that you don't lose your cool,
Mhm.
that, that you don't always just, feel like turning cartwheels when you come into the office, but you
Mhm.
do show up anyway,
Mhm.
and normalizing our humanness, right? Like normalizing our
Yep.
humanness is a big part of the leadership, space that I want everyone to be able to experience
Yeah.
whenever they look at, if it's, Catherine, if it's you, if it's me, if it's Colin as the leadership team, to just go like, oh, yeah, they're the leadership team, but they are also so human and
Mhm.
fallible
Mhm.
and will blow it and
Mhm.
will make mistakes
Mhm.
and talk about their own vulnerabilities. I think that that's, if the question was asked of me, that's what I would answer.
Yeah.
That people just understand that we are no no better or worse than
Yeah.
them, that we are just like them
Yeah.
in some really, like, consistent ways,
Yeah.
just doing our best with the tools we can access in the emotional context we're navigating within a 16th of a second, which is how fast our brain is working.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I think that in organizations, when we talk about wellness and support, there's a lot that can go wrong with
Mhm.
that. And there's a lot that people can or cannot try or are or are not willing to try. Um,
But it's not just a poster.
yeah.
It's not just giving out the EAP's phone number.
I hate that. I hate it when they're just like, here's our EAP. Call them.
Yeah. And I know, like, from a human resource perspective, they're
Mhm.
like, this is what we're allowed to do.
Mhm.
But I think we can also, like, I've worked with enough human resource directors in my own, like, life, in my own education, and I worked with 3 women who worked in organizational or in human resources when I was going through my
Mhm.
mindfulness classes to
Yeah.
become a mindfulness teacher. I was in a pod of 4, and 3 of them were human resource directors.
Ooh.
So I really felt like I had this opportunity to be mentored by human resources directors,
Mhm.
because I was going through this big training to try to institute mindfulness in the workplace, which is something that many employers do,
Mhm.
beyond the poster. They offer opportunities, and I started doing that during the pandemic as a peer support team. I built a peer support framework, started offering mindfulness monthly for the nurses, another opportunity to have mindfulness every other week.
Mhm.
I was not prepared for the pushback for doing mindfulness at work, but because I had worked with those women who believed as human resources that this was a completely appropriate thing, I felt empowered to be like, well, actually, some organizations really do believe in the power of creating space for this stuff at work,
Yeah.
and team building stuff at work,
Mhm.
and honoring the need that leaders have to create a culture where people feel safe at work,
Mhm.
and not just make it all the person's responsibility
Yeah.
to 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 be fine. um I think, gosh, Danielle said something about, like, never even learning how to
Mhm.
cope with big emotions and to cope with the overwhelm of responder work. And people might push back and say that that's not the job of the organization to teach.
Mm.
But if you're there 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, I ask then the organizational directors, are you carving out time for them to do it when they're off?
Yeah.
Do they have the bandwidth when they're already off work?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something we continuously hear from people, that I'm supposed to perform at this high level
Mhm.
without the skills for doing so. We talked about templates last week. If they're not getting the templates from the organization that they're working in, where are they getting them, and where are they getting the time in an understaffed, overwhelmed organization?
They're not.
They're not.
They're not.
And then again, they're breaking, and then we're like, "Oh, that's a personal failure."
Yeah.
Not okay.
Go pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You could do this on your own. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
Gosh. Now you're gonna see my rage.
What makes Autumn angry?
Mm.
Organizational inefficiencies.
Yeah, I think the refusal to know that when you're working with humans, humans have needs,
Yeah.
and that it is partially your responsibility to meet those needs,
Yeah.
um, and create templates for what those needs look like. When you send out those debriefs and you are so perfectly imperfect, I feel empowered by them,
Aw.
even though I rarely reply seen.
Mhm.
I watch like 90% of
Aw.
them. I really do. And every time I'm like just in awe of like how willing you are to be human for
Mhm.
us and with us.
Mm.
And I wish more leaders would take a page out of that playbook.
Aw. I love that. Even when my cat's butthole is right in the camera?
You know, who can reject a cat's butthole? I don't know.
Well, I feel like we should wrap up this episode. And we started off by talking about like why do people who choose meaningful work like they're willing to carry this weight? But that just doesn't really mean that they should be carrying it alone. Like they need these support systems. They're called to this job. How do we support them in this job? And the answer is not easy. The answer falls very much on leaders and on organizations, and I think that there's some work to do in that space, and that's good because once you're at the bottom, there's no way but up. But we'll get there. I think that we have the capacity to make some meaningful change in this space.
I think we already are.
I hope so.